Hello and welcome to the gallery. My name is Jon and today we'll be painting a cloak. First and foremost, I must excuse my voice. I am a little bit under the weather, but I'm trying to plow through it anyway. This time we will be continuing on with our Golden Demon project, and we'll be working on the Cloak of the Dark Apostle. Now, granted, most of this project will be quite on the darker side. It will be quite gloomy and everything like that, as you can see with the base originally. But we don't want anything to be pure black or anything like that. We want to have some extra texture, some extra look to it that is flattering and looks nice. So therefore, we're going to start with the cloak. It's a big piece of the model. It's basically the biggest solid surface of the entire piece. So we're going to figure out what we're going to do with that. Let's just start by base coating the cloak. As you can see, I already have a zenithal on it, but that's mainly just for a point of reference and nothing more. I'm going to put some Corvus black on the underside of the cloak as a base tone. We might work a little bit more on that a little bit later on. Then we're going to do the first coat that will go on the outside of the cloak, and that is Inky by Darkness. Now this cloak is in 3 pieces. It's both the big part flowing behind him, a little bit on the side, and the front piece, which is all in separate bits at the moment, so I will be painting them as separate bits. The reason for all these separate bits is so it's easier to get to all the nooks and crannies later on. But that does present us with a little bit of a problem, because we have to have the color fitting or thereabouts. We can always come back and touch it up a little bit later on. Now, once all this Inky by Darkness has gone on, and it's a few coats, very thin to keep it all crisp and clean, we're going to wet blend a little bit of that Corvus black into the recesses, into the shadows of the cloak. And it's a simple enough process. I put a little bit of wet paint, Corvus black in this case, in the shadow, and a little bit of the midtone, the Inky by Darkness, on the top bit, and then I just feather them together until they are mixed perfectly into one cohesive whole. Now, once this is all dried, I need a little bit of highlight. Not much, because like I said, we want this to be dark. Now I'm using Sons of Horror's green, and I'm placing that in the highlight areas. I'm wet blending in the same method before, wet blending the Inky by Darkness into the Sons of Horror's green. Before we go any further, I would like to mention that I have a Patreon down there if you would like to check that out. It is the best way to help me run this channel. All the proceeds that will come from the Patreon goes directly into the channel, be it new equipment, be it models, be it paint, be it something to help me get to Golden Demon, because it is a long travel. I live in an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and of course I have to take a flight and everything like that, but Golden Demon is next year. It's not this one, it's next year's, so that's just in the future. But by all means, if you want to support me, Patreon is definitely the best way to do it. But let's continue on with this cloak and add a little bit of more extra detail and fun stuff to it. We're going to start by streaking it a little bit, just lines, cross-hatching around it, just to give it the feeling of texture. We will also be adding a little bit of dots here and there, sort of stippling motion, just to give it some rough look to it. We're going to start with Inky by Darkness, and we're going to streak that from the actual Inky by Darkness that's in the cloak down into the Corvus black, just to get some extra look to it there. You can go overboard with this and do way too much, and perhaps I did go overboard later on and did way too much, but this is something you can always come back to. If you feel like you've gone too far, you can take the next color down and streak it back up to tone it down a little bit. Next, we're going to work on the midtones. So we're taking the Sons of Horror's green and we're streaking that from the Sons of Horror's down into the Inky by Darkness, getting that same tonal feel that we did with the Corvus black and the Inky by Darkness. Just going back and forth, keeping the paints very, very, very thin. So they will dry somewhat translucent and just give a feeling of a texture instead of being like a crossword puzzle. Now we're going to continue building up the highlights. We're going to grab a little bit of that matte white. We're going to mix it into the Sons of Horus green. And we're going to crosshatch that a little bit higher into the highlights. We're not using this to mix between two colors like we did with the Corvus Black and the Inky by Darkness, or the Inky by Darkness and the Sons of Horus green. We're using this to actually accentuate the highlights, because there will be light shining on the cloak in two places, both from his book and from the fiery backpack he has, and therefore we need a little bit of extra light there to give the sense of OSL, or object source lighting. Now we've gotten these a little bit more highlighted. We're going to continue on, and now we're just going to use the pure matte but thin it down and do many layers to get a little bit more extra highlight. We will also be putting this a little bit on the edge here and there, just to give that hint of a spot highlight or edge highlight if you like. Now we're cross-hatching this just where the main highlights are going to be. And that's, of course, on this big bulge on the back of his cloak. And there will also be parts on the front as well. And we'll just do that as a edge highlight and something like that. A little bit of stippling here and there. Before we will continue on with this cross-hatching and highlight, I felt it was going a little bit overboard, to be honest. I wanted to tone it down a little, get some more of a cohesive whole to it. So I took a little bit of the Inky by Darkness. I mixed it with matte medium and airbrush medium and thinned it out very much. I made this interesting sort of glaze with it, and I glazed that over the entire cloak. It gave it a good look. I liked this look. It smoothed it out a little bit, but it still has a lot of texture to it. Also, it was quite necessary at this point to take a little bit of that Corvus Black and thin that out very much and go slightly into all the recesses of the cloak, the deepest cuts and crevices, just to give it back a little bit of that darkness that was necessary in the recesses of the cloak. It's not a bad idea when you're building stuff like this and painting to this kind of degree to try to dry fit them together, like the front bit and the back bit. I mean, they don't really fit perfectly at this point because they got these metal rods sticking through them, but to see if we're on the right path. And indeed, I think we are, at least for now. So we are going to work a little bit on the underside. I just took some Naggaroth Night, thinned it out very much, and glazed it here and there, wet blended a little bit here and there, just to get some sort of different hue in the underside, something a little bit more interesting than pure black. You can't really see it, but it has this different tone to the black, which is nice. Now the only thing left to do is to put some extra color into those highlights, the light that is coming from the backpack. And we've been working on this kind of sickly yellowish green light, which will of course be the source lighting, will all be in that disturbing yellow greenish color. So I'm using Lamenter's yellow over matte white as the concept of light in this entire piece, and I like to keep the concept as a whole going through the entire piece because it'll tie it all together. So into all the places where we placed those white highlights on the edge of the cloak, on the rim of the cloak, whatever you might call it, around some of the holes, and of course on that big bulge and a bit in the front and everything like that, I'm using very thin layers of Lamenter's yellow, just glazing that on. It's an old glaze paint from Citadel, so let's use it what it says. It's a glaze, but we're thinning it even further so we can put it on all those extra bits and we can fade it together and we can have it all work together. Many layers, and we get this lovely hue of yellowish green, which will work perfectly with the actual base, which has already this hue of yellowish green. And of course, when the light sources are finally stuck on the model and painted up, this will make a lot more sense. or at least that's my plan. Thank you very much for joining me here today for this little delve into cloak painting. I mean, I might touch this up all a little bit more later on, but that's the thing with these bigger competition pieces. You can't really just paint this bit and you're done. You might always have to revisit it later on, and I'm okay with that. I feel like I am now 75-80% done with this cloak. When it's all stuck together, I might have to do a little bit of fiddling here and there, but that's just part of the process. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me here today. There are links in the description for all kinds of stuff. Social media, the Amazon store. If you want to, you can check that out. And various tidbits. Anyway, you do with it what you will. Like, share, and subscribe, and let the colors flow. But until next time, farewell.